Since Todd Boehly bought Chelsea in 2022, they have bought around 50 players, neglecting some good youth players that came through the Chelsea Academy and spent between £1 to £2 billion. And yet, other than a Club World Cup, they aren't exactly dominating the Premier League or European football at the minute. And the latest appointment of Liam Rosenior could end in disaster too. So I have decided to be their saviour, and I'm implementing a youth-only rule at Chelsea. Every season, I have to sell at least 3 players that didn't come through the Chelsea Youth Academy, and only then can I sign a player back that previously did. Until ultimately we are fielding a full squad of Chelsea youth players where our goal is to win the Champions League. Oh, and also I'm starting off with an up-to-date database in January. Kicking things off, I have set up a basic 4-2-3-1 which drops into a classic 4-4-2 out of possession with the ideal players in the positions I would want if everybody was fit. However, we know Levi Colwill, a current Chelsea Academy graduate, will miss pretty much the rest of the season with a very bad injury. So for now, Badiashile will fill the role when fit. And we made our intentions clear in our first game with a 2-0 win over West Ham, finding Cole Palmer in dangerous positions. Because although he is a player we eventually should sell, given the fact that he came through the Manchester City Academy, he is somebody that we can build the team around in the short term to keep meeting expectations. Because ultimately, we don't want to get ourselves sacked, and selling a player as good as Cole Palmer could lead to us failing in the expectations of the board and, of course, getting ourselves fired. However, there is a player that did play for Chelsea that's almost as good as Cole Palmer, if we ever had the opportunity to bring him back. For now though, I'll leave you guessing in the comments as to who that might be as we continue on this first season. In what turned out to be a strange end of the season, as Arsenal dumped us out of the FA Cup, beating us at home 3-0 in a humiliating defeat, despite that, we did lock in some big wins against the 2 Manchester clubs in our remaining Premier League fixtures, but still only secured 5th place in the Premier League table as Arsenal went on to win the league. And despite us knocking Liverpool out 5-2 on aggregate in the round of 16 of the Champions League, and then Real Madrid in the quarter-finals 4-3 across the 2 legs, we eventually lost to eventual runners-up Bayern Munich in the semi-final, who annoyingly lost to Spurs 5-1 in the final. But this, of course, is where the fun begins, because now that it's the summer, we are obligated to sell at least 3 players who weren't from the Chelsea Youth Academy until eventually we have just a full squad of Chelsea Youth Academy prospects. And we can only sign a player that used to be in Chelsea's Academy once one of those players has been sold. So it kind of unlocks a signing for us, but I won't go overboard. There isn't that many players to sign anyway, but if we're looking at the players who we could sell this summer, there are some interesting prospects. I mean, this squad is massive. I'm obviously going to look for ones that I think we could do without to begin with, the ones that are on the fringe of the side, and look to bring in some prospects pretty soon. The advantage, of course, is that this was an updated database, but it's not as updated as Marc Guéhi going to Manchester City, which I'll admit works in my favour, because as soon as we sold our first non-Chelsea Academy player in Marc Guéhi, we then snapped up Marc Guéhi from Palace on a free transfer. I did also sell more than the 3 non-Academy players that I was obligated to do so, as Tosin went to Brentford for 9.5, Raheem Sterling went to Everton for just 2.4, and Benoit Badiashile went to Bayern Munich for 32 million. Now, to give a bit of an explanation on how I'm either signing players or the players that I'm going to keep, I'm basing this off of homegrown status, which is on the games. You can see here, homegrown status, trained at club, and I think it's for 3 years, between 0 and 21 years old. And if I do that, then for me, that is a player who has been there through the Youth Academy for 3 years. So obviously you can see there's a lot of players that you might be familiar with: Tomori, Billy Gilmore, Conor Gallagher, all of these players that I could potentially bring back to Chelsea. But also I'm looking at it in terms of the players that are currently in the under-18s and under-21s. There might be players that Chelsea have bought that can spend 3 years in the under-21s or before they are 21, which would then technically be classed as homegrown talent. So I'm going to let that slide. Some of them are very close on the edge, but the likes of Esteval, he joined, I think, when he was 18. If he then joins 18 and I don't sell him before 18, 19, 20, 21. That's 4 years at least that he is in the Chelsea Youth Academy. So he would technically get a homegrown status. So I'm in two minds to kind of use that. Either way, one of the player who definitely counts is Lewis Hall, and we snapped him back for Newcastle for 42.5 million. That's it in terms of transfers for now though, and I'm keeping the 4-2-3-1 for Season 2, and the new arrivals and players returning from loan like Nicholas Jackson for example will be fielding in our strongest 11. A solid second season as we defeat Liverpool 3-0 at Wembley to lift the Carabao Cup. Cole Palmer was a star for us. That shadow striker role was made for him, and he bagged 27 goals in 38 starts across the season, but no one else stepped up into big goal scoring numbers alongside him, and that made us suffer across the rest of the season. Although some new players such as 18-year-old Satpayev did find first team minutes, and he played excellent when doing so, picking up 2 assists off the bench in just 8 games in the Premier League. Ruben Amorim's Brentford knocked us out of the FA Cup quarter-finals at Stamford Bridge, and it was another semi-final exit in the Champions League, this time to Arsenal, who he took to extra time but couldn't get the better of. The league was the most disappointing, however. It is once again a 5th place finish, and I'm starting to think of new systems for next season, as well as who out of this Chelsea squad is going to be sold this summer, as another 3 has got to go. And so I made some big calls this summer, and a total of 5 non-academy players did leave, including a starting midfielder. Enzo Fernandez was the biggest departure. Unfortunately, out of the 4 clubs who did bid for him that was accepted, he went to the only Premier League side in the run-in for 60 million. Mudryk was a surprising one that I didn't think would ever leave and I would be able to get rid of, but he's off to Hoffenheim for 15 million. Malo Gusto was off to Germany, going to Bayern Munich for 25 million. Disasi left to go to Como in Italy, adding another 13 million to the bank. Finally, I decided to sell Jorgensen to Arsenal for 16 million pound as well. But I had 3 massive players lined up to return to Chelsea who should never have been let go. Tino Livramento was one of the first players from the academy sold during the Todd Burley era, and unfortunately it's going to cost us around 79 million pound to bring him back to the club from what we sold him to Southampton for. I always liked Fikayo Tomori in defence, and we are bringing him back to the club after a few seasons at AC Milan for 26 million. Finally, it's the big one. Jamal Musiala, the man in question from Bayern Munich for 129 million pound, a world-class attacking midfielder that could help us sell Cole Palmer in the future, and that not a lot of people would have known came through the Chelsea Academy. I've been experimenting with a 3 at the back system because we have Levi Colwill, Reece James, Mark Guehi, Tomori, and yet to sell Fofana, but with Musiala as a false 9 and Cole Palmer in that shadow striker role again. Musiala is the perfect player to drop off the back line of the defence and wander, and then pick out the on-rushing players such as Cole Palmer to find us an opening and a chance on goal. And with the 3 wins from 4, only losing to Liverpool on the opening day, I was happy enough to see how it continued throughout the season. Musiala, up until getting a bad injury in mid-April, was our star player, scoring 21 goals and getting 13 assists. Doing exactly what I hoped he would do in that false 9 position. This dropped the numbers of Cole Palmer, however, and that sacrifice left us vulnerable in all competitions. Although it was progression in the Premier League, we failed to win a single trophy this season, as league winners Spurs also beat us in the League Cup final 4-2. They nearly secured a treble, if not for Real Madrid in the Champions League final, which was the team who knocked us out of our 3rd Champions League semi-final in a row. Some positives at the very least is Esteval, who played a lot of football and although just turned 21, is now fully eligible as a homegrown talent at Chelsea. Because outside of a couple of names, there aren't many players who are eligible that I would want to bring back, as they are nowhere near as good as our current crop. 3 more players are going to have to leave the club though, so it won't be quiet this summer. The first player out the door this summer was 25-year-old Liam Delap, whose move to Aston Villa brought 28 million pound to the club. Another player gone, and the second of 3 required was a player, I'll be honest, I didn't even know Chelsea had bought. Either way, he's off for 8.5 million. One player I'm struggling to get rid of is Garnacho, who has turned down clubs every summer. A big departure was Wesley Fofana, who with just 1 year left on his contract left left for £16 million. Romeo Lavia also went to AC Milan for 45.5, another defensive midfielder that is no longer needed, but for good money. Cucurella also leaves the club for Borussia Dortmund for 25 million. Andre Santos leaves for Al Ettifaq for 10 million. And Dario Usogo became the 7th permanent player to leave the club as he went to Al Fayha for 9 million. There's also a couple of players who've gone out on loan with either mandatory or optional future fees, but I'll leave them as departures for possibly next summer. 3 players rejoined the club as Billy Gilmour returned to Chelsea as a rotational option from Napoli for 17.2 million. The other 2 did cost a bit more money, however they might be the last to ever return as Ian Matson joins for 50 million. And the final one for this season at least is Rio Ngamoa, who I'm excited to develop into hopefully a world-class winger from Liverpool for £70 million though. After a couple of tests, I might have gone a little bit wild with a new tactical system though. My plan with the ball is to leave one centre-back and have Reece James and Caicedo protect the defence with the full-backs marking anyone out wide, but keeping a strong front 5, and it drops into a 4 across the defensive line when we lose the ball. I'm also going to be giving a lot of time up front to Dastan Satpayev, who could be a fantastic striker option going forward and is just a season away from becoming a homegrown at the club. What a crazy season this turned out to be though, as our system did kind of work and our front 5 thrived. Satpayev scored 20 goals, Musiala with 14. Both wingers also got in on the act with a lot of assists, and Cole Palmer bagged 34 goals and 15 assists. Unfortunately for us, we suffered in the Cups, losing in both semi-finals to Southampton and to Manchester City on penalties in the FA Cup. A draw in the Premier League campaign final day to Leeds meant that we also dropped into 5th place in the table as Spurs lift the Premier League. However, this time we overcame the semi-final of the Champions League, beating Real Madrid 5-2 on aggregate, as we now have a final against PSG to play. We have our best lineup, but of course, it's not a full Chelsea Academy 11, so even if we did win, the challenge is certainly not over, and we continue to sell non-academy players and develop new ones coming through. Even still, it is a good test to see where we are with the players such as Satpayev and Ngamoa playing. However, PSG did take the lead through Bukayo Saka. They then doubled their lead from a corner in the second half. We went out of it though. The 2 attacking midfielders, Musiala and Cole Palmer, combined well to make it 2-1. But unfortunately, PSG closed off the match with a third as Doué's cross found Saka. But at least we were close. There's still a long way for us to go and a lot of dead wood that we need to shift. And I'm coming in this summer with a brutal intent that might set us back for a couple of seasons. You see, this summer, I have intent to sell Robert Sanchez. Goalkeepers are always the hardest to sort of achieve in these youth saves, but Robert Sanchez, I think it's time for him to go. He's not exactly a very good goalkeeper anyway, and he is wanted by other clubs. However, there's a keeper that's coming through the youth academy, Freddie Bernal, who I think might be a good option. Definitely short-term, but potentially long-term. He's 20 years of age now. He has an okay potential, resolute personality, which isn't bad. And of course, he come through the Chelsea Youth Academy. But there is a lot more players that will be leaving. And as I mentioned last summer, in the transfer history, we did loan out quite a lot of players who are loaned out to leave permanently. So I'll let you know when those things happen. However, there's also another player that's coming through the academy I think I want to give some game time to, and it's this man here, Richard Amponsa, who is one of the first youth academy players to come through that we've had, but he's 6'5". He looks great as a centre-back option. He isn't bad on the ball either. With a little bit of training, I think he could be a great starting centre-back for us. This summer was brutal, however. So many players left, it's easier to talk you through them and why myself. Although Garnacho, I still can't get rid of. Garnacho aside, I have got rid of some really annoying players that are first team players that obviously don't count in our homegrown status, including Cole Palmer, and we didn't get that much money for him either. He was worth over £80 million, but a bid for Atletico Madrid come in from 41, and I just decided to just accept it because I don't think I'd be able to sell him any other time, and I think that might be a problem that would come across. So we had to sell him eventually. Unfortunately, it just wasn't for a lot of money. Emmanuel Omega, though, we got £35 million for, so I do feel like we stole some money from Inter Milan. That was a loan to buy from last season, which I was on about, which I was kind of hoping would lead on for this year so that we had loads. we didn't need it. We've got so many players going out. João Pedro and Kenda both go into Manchester City. Can't be helped. Unfortunately, they're the only clubs who bid for these players, but £78 million for João Pedro, £45 million for Giovanni Kenda, both to Manchester City, so over £100 million from them. Both come in at a little bit of profit too. So yeah, a lot of players have left the club, and some more will still go. I mean, João Hato is going on a... Actually, I think it's only an optional future fee, but he's on loan at Spurs. But if they win the league, he goes permanently. They've won the league last 2 seasons. I've loaned out a few players as well, but the players brought in, you might have seen, Mason Mount is one of them. So he was transfer listed for £10 million. I thought, why not? He's barely played for Manchester United for a while. His attributes have really gone down. Conor Gallagher as well. And the reason for it is we are going back to a 4-2-3-1. £31 million I had to pay for Conor Gallagher, so basically for £10 million they got Cole Palmer. It is what it is. And then I brought in Bulka, who is a goalkeeper who used to play for Chelsea as well. So been scouting goalkeepers for a while just in case. He was fully homegrown at Chelsea, so we brought Marcin Bulka back, but he couldn't even get a work permit even though he was homegrown. Only a 2-star keeper. So goalkeeper-wise, we might struggle. What I have done, though, is I've set it up on my squad view. I've added the homegrown status, so now we can see all the players who are homegrown and all the players who are not. And as you can see, it's only Caicedo and Nicholas Jackson who might be going out on loan, who doesn't have any homegrown status at all. Caicedo, no bids have come in for him whatsoever. I'm not too displeased, exactly, but the rest of them... There are a couple like Jamie Gittins, who's trained in the country, same as this goalkeeper, Garnacho, and Omari Kellyman, who I will be getting rid of, hopefully. The rest of them, all of that, trained at the club or through the youth academy here at Chelsea. We've got a couple of players who are coming into it for the first time. We've got Mueka, who might be good for us up front. Reggie Walsh, who might be an asset in midfield. There's a couple of players, another striker there. A couple of wingers as well who might do well for us. The rest of them, and including Richard, who might be going out on loan for first-team football, which I'm happy to do because we've got the centre-backs right now. We are going for a 4-2-3-1 though, with Esteval, Ngamoa and Bernal playing as many games as we possibly can to stop the ones that aren't homegrown from going in. But yeah, Jamal Musiala will now be the shadow striker. We've still got Dastan Satpayev up front. We're all good for this season. I'm quite excited for how it goes. The start of the season is giving me no real idea how we will perform with a win against City, but a big loss to Newcastle and a draw to West Ham. We persevered, but we knew we weren't going to be challenging as well as previously. That being said, Musiala stepped up and scored 23 goals and got 14 assists this season. And Esteval was also great, with 16 goals and 24 assists. Ngamoa was slightly disappointing, and Satpayev had an average season, just scoring 14 goals in 29 starts. A semi-final loss to Iraola's Newcastle in the FA Cup seen us out of that trophy, and they also knocked us out of the Champions League at the semi-final stage, beating us 8-3 on aggregate. There won't be no Champions League next season, however, because we finished down in 8th place in the league. With only a few players left to leave, and one of them being Caicedo, it might be a while before we see the UEFA Champions League again. We hit the hard reset as Bino Gittins went to Madrid for £28 million. João Hato was sold to Newcastle for £22 million. Garnacho finally went as well to Newcastle for £16 million. And Pedro Neto left to Everton for £11 million. However, like Cole Palmer last season, I reluctantly sold Caicedo for just £47 million to Liverpool. We brought Armando Broja in on a free contract, and the weirdest thing then happened. Before the season even began, I was called into a board meeting where a failure to attend would mean an instant sacking, and it was brought about because of Broja's performances, when the season hasn't even started yet. That was a bit odd, but either way, we are switching the system around and going 3 at the back with 2 up front. And I'm finally bringing in Richard and Ponza into the first team, as his development deserves it. The first 5 games was a test and included Arsenal, where I wanted to see the false 9 Musiala play and how it responded, and it was a joy to watch. Winning all 5 games and stuffing Arsenal 4-0 at the Emirates. The combination of Musiala and Satpayev was beautiful. Musiala Musiala got himself 26 goals in all 3 competitions, and Satpayev only got 22, but they worked really well together, bringing the wingers Esteval and Ngamoa in as well. We also introduced some of our youngsters such as Ryan Kavuma McQueen every now and then, and he got some goals and assists too, as well as Mueka, who came off the bench a lot up front. Unfortunately, we were knocked out of the semi-final of the Carabao Cup, losing 2-1 to Manchester City. And Thomas Frank's Spurs were just so good this season, beating us in the league and actually winning the Premier League title ahead of us by 7 points as well. We did, however, get to the FA Cup final, and we took the lead against Manchester City, hoping to get our revenge. But Erling Haaland also ripped us apart, and we lost 3-2. Development-wise, the commitment to playing players such as Richard paid off as he's grown into a fabulous defender. And I do quite like the system that we rocked this season. Squad-wise, we are just 2 players away from a full squad that has been trained by the Chelsea Academy, so we're almost there. Those 2 remaining players have already left the club, with Penders going permanently, but Nicholas Jackson only accepting a loan deal again. Players coming into the first team is Basiru, who plays centre midfield or right wing and is only 20 years old, and Cameron Vasmer. There is a rotational option for Musiala, but he might also go out on loan. Once again, the system seemed to work really well and the players gelled well together. Satpayev scored 23 goals and got himself 9 assists. Lewis Hall and Esteval had a competition to see who could get the most assists overall, and Hall beat him by 1, reaching 18 in total. It was a great season for Richard and Ponce, as he also got 11 goals throughout the season. Finally, things clicked at the right time, and we lifted the Premier League, finishing above Spurs, who had been so dominant the past 3 years. And in the Champions League, we had a great run, knocking out Liverpool in the round of 16, Newcastle in the quarterfinals, and finally Bayern Munich in the semi-final, who we beat 4-2. And in the final, we were meeting Real Madrid. And this is our first attempt at winning the Champions League with a full homegrown squad from the Chelsea Academy. A fully fit team from the Chelsea Academy too, however we are starting Musiala from the left and Satpayev and Guehi do have knocks. But either way, this is Real Madrid in the Champions League, and everybody knows this isn't going to be easy. And within 5 minutes, Richard and Ponce opens a scoring with a big header from Esteval's corner. Things got even better for us because on the 22nd minute, Vinicius Jr. hacked Rio down, and we brought bad news for Vinicius as he received a straight red card. But despite going down to 10 men, Real Madrid were still on top of us and eventually brought it back level through Florian Wirtz. In the second half though, we restored our lead through the penalty spot. But a howler from the goalkeeper Bernal in the 91st minute meant we were going to extra time. And in extra time, our luck had completely run out. In fact, it was bad luck, because with changes to the substitutes, despite being a man up, we were chasing shadows before Valverde finally scored the winner. And once again, we are watching another team lift the Champions League trophy in front of us, but I feel like we're getting closer. Finally, this season, we got rid of the last player not from the academy on a permanent, as Nicholas Jackson leaves on a free transfer. However, we did also lose Ian Matson as a free transfer to Juventus. With no signings, just call-ups to the first team, as Tom Benson will be getting minutes at left-back this season, just 17 years old. And after the howler from last season's Champions League final, a change in goal as well, as Connor Griffiths, at just 19, will become the new Chelsea number 1. And outside of potentially a new defensive midfielder, I think we have a very competitive side. I was wrong, however. What a team this turned out to be. 3 players scored over 20 goals, with Satpayev banging in the most at 26. Musiala wasn't far behind him with the most goal contributions of 25 goals and 19 assists. And although wingers still did very well, Mueka was a great option for us, scoring 20 goals as mainly a substitute. And Chelsea are once again champions of the Premier League by 10 points as well. Unfortunately though, we lost in the semi-final of the Champions League again to PSG in extra time. The second half of the season, Tom Benson went on loan and has developed quite positively. Connor Griffiths though was very good considering his age, and his development too has been real solid. Satpayev had a standout year and at 24 has become a solid striker for us. With no transfer business needed this summer, it was just looking for new young talents coming through to introduce them to the first team again. Josh McDonald was one of the players was, although I was confused as to where to put him, and I was thinking of even trying him as a defensive midfielder. Adam Hills is another player we are bedding in slowly, but it's another left back. I'm so glad I kept Mweka around as there was lots of bids for him, and his influence off the bench has really kept us going. Same for Kavuma McQueen, who plays both wings, so a perfect replacement for when Rio or Esteval isn't fit. This season was a backward step in terms of performances and competitions, and that showed in player statistics too, as Satpayev was the top scorer of just 22 goals, but missed the last third of the season. Musiala got 20, but did have the most assists with 23. Biseru popped up quite a bit in the second half of the season, and was one of our only positives from the campaign. Unfortunately, we had a bad end to the season, after some injuries mounted up such as Satpayev, and we fell out of the title race, which Spurs took advantage of again. They even went on to win the Champions League too, where we unfortunately only managed to get to the quarterfinals before Real Madrid. They came again and ended our dreams. Definitely feels like Real Madrid are sort of our arch enemies at the minute in terms of European football, and Spurs are our arch enemies in terms of domestic. We just need a lucky season. A lucky season and some of these youngsters to step up and become world-class talents ideally. I think I found my new defensive midfielder though in Biseru. He isn't exactly Caicedo levels, but he's decent and the best we have. Sam Woodward is a player that we could have make a big difference for us this season. He looks fantastic as a 20-year-old striker and can give Musiala and Satpayev a rotational option with Mweka, unless I send him out on loan. This season again was a tough one. We were never in the title race and injuries just kept coming at us. It did mean that new players such as Pete Dodds were given game time, a player I haven't even mentioned yet but we've been keeping an eye on. It's another solid left wing back option for us, which we now have 5 if you include Lewis Hall and Livramento. We finished runners up in the Carabao Cup to Enrique's Manchester City on penalties, and they absolutely smashed the Premier League too, while we dropped down to 4th place. However, we were drawn against the same Manchester City team in the Champions League semi-final, and that's where we finally got the better of them, defeating them 3-1 on aggregate. But look who it is again in the Champions League final. And there's some more bad news. We are without both Tino Livramento, who is injured for months, and Jamal Musiala, who again is out for quite a long time too. Which means we're going to have to defeat Real Madrid, the greatest team in this competition's history, without 2 of our best players. Definitely our best player, Jamal Musiala, and we're going to be using Reece James at right wing back, who this is going to be his last ever game because he's retiring. Even still, in a final, anything can happen, and I'm proud of these boys for getting this far, and of course, it's our 3rd Champions League final. An early chance fell to us and Richard, our centre-back, who rattled the crossbar with a long-range effort. Just minutes later, and Real Madrid caught us on the counter and smacked our crossbar too from a header. But then the chance we needed finally came, and Kavuma McQueen does brilliantly, and James finds Satpayev, and with the finish, it was absolutely elite. However, there is a call for offside, and the VAR are checking it, but the decision is the goal is awarded. And from this angle, you can see he times his run almost as perfectly as he put in the finish. Disaster came from defending a corner soon after, as the referee then pointed for the spot because of a foul and gave Real Madrid a penalty, which again was checked and agreed with by VAR. Vinicius Jr. stepped up, but Connor Griffiths, the young goalkeeper, makes a huge save. We can't just keep relying on the heroics of our goalkeeper, however. We needed to take the pressure off of our back line, and that's when an attack down the left with Guehi, Rio and Lewis all combining, with Hall jinking his way through, scored a beautiful second that we fully deserve. We seen a weakness down this left hand side and we kept exploiting it, and although the first attempt in the box didn't pay off, the shot from Biseru was perfect and it's 3. And that, if you ask me, is worthy of a subscribe if you aren't already, which YouTube suggests nearly 40% if you aren't yet, because that sealed the deal at full time, and the whistle has gone as a full squad of players, all trained by the Chelsea Academy between the ages of 15 to 21 for 3 years, all homegrown talents, lifted the Champions League trophy. Now, the save game file is available for anybody who wants to pinch the tactic or carry on the story at patreon.com/MegaLukeGaming, or on the YouTube channel members, which has loads of other perks as well, such as early access videos. And of course, if you're looking for something else to watch, on screen right now is what I did very similar with Manchester United.